morning. I am not very comfortable with the judgment in question, and I will state my reasons. As a lawyer and as a student of law, I find two difficulties in the judgment. Not the original, but the judgment in review. The first difficulty is the procedural angle.
Confidence.
The original judgment arose out of very peculiar factual matrix, which is not even referred to in the judgment in review. The factual matrix was that a superior officer in the annual confidential reports said something about his subordinate, who happened to be a person belonging to scheduled caste. This led to filing of a complaint under the provisions of the Atrocities Act. The officers filed a petition in the High Court for quashing that all that I have done is discharge of my duties, and therefore there is no case of atrocities. The High Court declined to interfere. Matter came to Supreme Court. Leave aside what the Supreme Court said in the earlier judgment on law, but on facts, Supreme Court came to the conclusion it was a gross abuse of the process of the court. And that prosecution was quashed. In the entire review judgment, there is nothing is said about whether the prosecution was rightly quashed or not. In fact, if you read the review judgment very carefully, that part of the finding of the earlier judgment is not set aside. What is set aside are some of the directives which the court issued. What are those directives? Let's have a look at them. So this is one serious problem in the review petition. First direction is proceedings in the present case are clearly abuse of the process of court and are quashed. Now this is not set aside in the review judgment. In other words, if the substantive relief which was granted in the earlier judgment does not require any interference, then there is no scope for review. A review does not lie on pure questions of law. A review lies only if the original judgment granting a relief or refusing a relief is required to be set aside. This is not done. So as a lawyer, I find a difficulty that how could such a review petition be maintained. Then second, there is no absolute bar against grant of anticipatory bail in cases under the Atrocities Act if no prima facie case is made out. Now what is wrong with this? Ultimately, if even in Lalita Kumari's case, that's a constitution-based judgment, the court has said that if the essential ingredients of the offence are not there in the complaint, then there is no obligation on the police officer to register the FIR. Now, if the court, upon scrutiny of the material, comes to the conclusion that there is no prima facie case made out, is the court helpless in granting a relief to the person concerned? Answer is no. We must remember that apart from the law made by the Parliament, there are constitutional rights of an individual. Now, whether there is a prima facie case or not, it's purely judicial function. Purely judicial function. Therefore, there is no question of violation of the principle of separation of powers. And the court, in the original judgment, came to the conclusion that there is no prima facie case. Now, this is only and exclusively within the province of the court. And therefore, if the court comes to the conclusion that there is no prima facie case, the court is entitled to grant anticipatory bail. There is no proposition recognized by any court that even if there is no prima facie case, the man should be arrested. If such a proposition is accepted, then it will be clear violation of Article 21, which is one of the fundamental rights. It will also be violation of Article 14. Therefore, the finding of the original judgment that there is no prima facie case and therefore the person concerned is entitled to anticipatory bail cannot be faulted with. Now let's see what is the next. In view of the acknowledged abuse of law of arrest in cases under the Atrocities Act, arrest of a public servant can only be after approval of the appointing authority and of a non-public servant after approval by the Superintendent of Police, which may be granted in appropriate cases if considered necessary for reasons recorded. Such reasons must be scrutinized by the magistrate for permitting further. Now, this is a bit troublesome. The review judgment finds fault with this aspect of the matter. Now let me place what I feel. Even though a police officer has a power to arrest, which flows out of section 41 of the Criminal Procedure Code, is he bound to arrest? He has a discretion in the matter. The review judgment almost suggests that moment an FIR is registered, the man must be arrested. The police officer has discretion. Suppose he comes to the conclusion that this man is not likely to abscond, that this man is not going to tamper with, that this man is going to cooperate in investigation. Why should he arrest him? Now the difficulty that arises out while implementing the judgment is that moment FIR, offence under the Atrocities Act, man must be arrested. Therefore, purely a mechanical process. This is what is not acceptable to me. Now, the other two aspects. That if an allegation is made against a public servant, in discharge, when he is doing something in the discharge of his duty, is he or is he not acting under the color of his office? And a registration of such offences and his arrest, would it or would it not demoralize the officer's concern? You see, in this particular case, it was clearly found that it was an abuse of the process of the court. Now, we have seen 498A. Even court has taken judicial notice of the fact that 498A is often abused. Now, the court comes to the conclusion that this provision also has a serious possibility of abuse. Whether a constitutional court should be a silent spectator. Should he give up its hands and say, sorry, we can't do anything? As long as Article 21 is in the Constitution, it is the duty of every constitutional court to see that the man's fundamental right is not violated. And in order to safeguard his fundamental rights, if the court feels that we need to introduce a caution, what else it is? The court says that let the superior officer concerned see the facts. Why it can't be done under Article 142? After all, the person concerned has the protection of fundamental rights. And all that is expected is a scrutiny. If the question of arrest or if the question of registering the FIR is subject to somebody's scrutiny because he has constitutional rights, he has fundamental rights, how does it amount to violation of the provisions of the law? I fail to understand. This is my second reservations about this judgment. Now let's take, this is in case of a public servant, but in case of a non-public servant, all that court says is in the original judgment that let a superior police officer examine the case. What is wrong with that? Even under section 36 of the Criminal Procedure Code, whatever that IO can do, his superior can do. All that court has said that let superior police officer examine the case. I do not think that amounts to making a law. Now let's talk about Article 142. I do accept that while exercising powers under Article 142, the court cannot disregard the statutory law. I also accept that while exercising powers under Article 142, the court cannot disregard a statutory provision. But there are cases and cases where while exercising powers under Article 142, the court has not only disregarded, the court has said that this does not bind us and does not take away our powers to do justice under Article 142. In my respectful submission, my first charge against the Supreme Court is that your judgments under Article 142 are not consistent. The law on Article 142 is chaos. Let's have some other day some debate on powers of the Supreme Court under 142. Take for example Vishakha, where there are statutory disciplinary rules, Vishakha judgment overrides. That's what we are told. Anyway, that's another issue. So therefore, I accept the proposition that in exercise of power under Article 142, the court cannot disregard statutory provisions. But there are umpteen cases where court has not only disregarded the statutory provisions, but has categorically said that these statutory provisions do not bind us. We can exercise our powers under Article 142. In fact, the courts, I almost said that Article 142 is a source of making law. To that extent, the courts have gone. So therefore, this judgment in review is not the last word as far as Article 142 is concerned. It's an issue which is seriously required to be debated. Now, the last point which I want you to seriously consider. What is wrong with the preliminary inquiry? See, take CBI. CBI's manual contains a provision for preliminary inquiry. From where do you get it? CRPC doesn't say so. Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, under which the CBI acts, also does not talk of any preliminary inquiry. But historically, CBI has been doing what they call as the PE, Lalita Kumari, which is a judgment of the Constitution Bench, recognizes PE in certain circumstances. And the list that they have given is not exhaustive. Like Keshwananda, it is impossible to enumerate all basic features of the Constitution. They have only suggested some. So therefore, applying the principle contained in the Constitution Bench judgment that in certain circumstances you need to have a preliminary inquiry so that the man's fundamental right are not violated. Ultimately, it's the duty of the Constitutional Court to do justice in a given case. No matter what the statutory provision says, the court has to consider the facts and exercise its powers to protect the fundamental rights of a citizen. Now, in my respectful submission, the review judgment is contrary to Lalita Kumari's case. Lalita Kumari's case contemplates a preliminary inquiry in certain circumstances. Whether the principle contained in Lalita Kumari's case is to be extended to the offences under the Atrocities Act or not is another issue. But the court proceeds on an assumption that Lalita Kumari does not contemplate a PE. As far as the other aspects are concerned, that yes, it is for the legislature to formulate legislative policy. There can't be any debate on this issue. An unwise law, so long as it does not violate the constitutional provisions, is a matter for the legislature and not for the court. The court cannot sit in judgment over the wisdom of the legislature, accepted. But it is duty of the court to examine whether the law violates any of the provisions of the Constitution or not, and more so in case of fundamental rights. Now the last point is that why this review at all? Because according to me, the procedure which is adopted is totally contrary to the settled position in law. When can a review lie? Those of you who have seen CPC, I don't know whether you are in first year, second year or third year. The only ground for review is an error apparent on the face of the record. Now what is the error apparent on the face of the record? In the review, the court has sat in appeal over its earlier judgment. Don't know that the court's findings on these issues is contrary to law. The entire issue was debated, everybody was heard, even Union of India was heard. Union of India never raised any objection to the court formulating, if you see the original judgment. So where is the ground for review? In a subsequent case, it was open to the court to overrule the earlier judgment. That's another issue. But there is a fundamental procedural defect in this review. There is no ground for review at all. Nobody is aggrieved by the review. The person who was aggrieved has not filed. The Union of India was not aggrieved, merely because some position in law is stated. Ultimate supreme value in any civilized society is the rule of law. And the Supreme Court, in my respectful submission, however high it may be, it is not above the law. Second thing which I find, with which I am not comfortable with this judgment is, there is a catenary of judgments of the Supreme Court which say that though doctrine of stare decisis is not applicable in India, We should not overrule earlier judgments unless some evil consequences have followed, or there are very compelling reasons to do so, or that the court has lost sight of some important aspect of the matter. In my respectful submission, none of these parameters. The problem of the Indian Supreme Court is, and I have said so often from public platforms, that there is a tendency to review its judgments, to overrule its judgments at frequent intervals. Now, especially practically in civil law branches, sometimes it becomes almost difficult to find out what the current state of law is. If the court has taken a wrong view according to the parliament or according to the legislature, it is for the legislature or the parliament to correct and make the amendment, which the parliament has made in this case, that no plenary inquiry. They have said so. But for the court to keep on changing its stand is not something which augurs well for this country. So, subject to these reservations, I accept the proposition that a matter of policy is for the legislature. I accept the proposition that our constitution contemplates separation of powers, and it is not for the court to sit in judgment over the policy matters. It is not for the court to examine the wisdom or otherwise of the law that Parliament or the legislature has chosen to make. If the court finds that the law is unconstitutional, it can strike down, but you cannot whittle down the provisions of the Act by sitting virtually in judgment over what the legislature has done. My problem in life is very simple. चुप बैठता हूँ तो शब्दों का दम घुटता है, बोलूं तो लोग खफा होते हैं. Thank you.